And finally, excuse the chair, 12 minutes late. I was trying to use the new YouTube Creator Studio version, the beta version, and I screwed things up royally. Excuse me. I had to delete a bunch of recordings that I had set up. I don't think my camera's on. It's weird. Camera's not live. Here, let me troubleshoot this. Excuse me a moment. I have to find the end of the cord. Seems to be plugged in. It was working last night. Well, we'll just have to go without the camera. Trust me, I look great. All right, enough screwing around. Let's get to it. This is the closed-door testimony from Peter Strozk back on August 28th of 2018 in the House Judiciary Committee hearing room. Of course, they call it the Committee on the Judiciary, but we know what we're talking about. Now, first of all, I do want to say, those of you who are up right now, you're either at work, on your way to work, or you called in sick because today's the day after St. Patrick's Day. Either way, I really appreciate your being here. Thank you. So let's get to it. What I'm going to do, by the way, I'm going to read this sucker through. I'll pause for editorial comments. And if by any chance there's sections where I can read a little more quickly without constantly saying Strozk, Collins, Strozk, Jordan, I'll skip along, but I will back up and fix those, or I should say I'll stop and reintroduce those if it starts to get a little confusing. And I'll try to announce ahead of time what's going on there. So that's a little formatting thing. Otherwise, it's all good. All right. Executive Session, Committee on the Judiciary, joint with the Committee on Government Reform and Oversight, U.S. House of Representatives, Washington, D.C. Interview of wrong guy. Interview of Peter Strozk. Wednesday, June 27th, 2018. I was looking at the Bruce Orr earlier when I read that date. And that August date. I've got to open this up. I had a problem with a Windows update come down the pipe late last night while I was setting up, and it ruined all of my formatting on my desktop. So some of this got moved around more than it should have. Let's see if this is... Yeah, we're good. All right. So, Mr. Summers, good morning. This is a transcribed interview of Peter Strozk, the former Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division. Chairman Goodlatte and Chairman Gowdy requested this interview as part of a joint investigation by the House Judiciary Committee and the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to conduct oversight into the Department of Justice's investigation of former Secretary Clinton's handling of classified information and related matters. Would the witness please state his name and position at the FBI for the record? Peter Strozk, Deputy Assistant Director, Human Resources Division. Now, of course, he used to be the head of the Counterintelligence Division, so to suddenly wind up being the DAD, Human Resources, that's obviously they were working his way out before they fired him. And again, this is last year, so this all happened previously. Mr. Summers, I want to thank you for appearing here today voluntarily, and we appreciate your willingness to do so. My name is Zachary Summers, and I am the Majority General Counsel for the Judiciary Committee. I will now ask everyone who is here in the room to introduce themselves for the record, starting to my right with Arthur Baker, who will be leading the questioning for today. Arthur Baker, Investigative Counsel, House Judiciary Committee Majority Staff. I'm Robert Parmenter, Chief Counsel for Crime and Terrorism, House Judiciary Committee Majority. Ryan Breitenbach, Senior Counsel, House Judiciary Majority. Congressman John Ratcliffe, representing the 4th District of Texas. Steve Castor, with the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, the Majority Staff. Jim Jordan, 4th District of Ohio. Ethan Don, FBI OCA. Paul Wellens, Associate General Counsel, FBI OGC. Cecilia Bessie, Acting Deputy General Counsel, FBI OGC. Eitan Goldman, Attorney for Special Agent Strozk. Suzanne Soxman-Grooms, OGR Minority. Marta Adamu, OGR Minority. Lila Waz-Piper, Judiciary Minority. Aaron Hiller, Judiciary Minority. Ira Hare, I can never see how to pronounce this woman's name, and I've never heard it pronounced. I'm going to call it Harahan. It's wrong, but it's as close as I can get. And when I come to her in testimony, it's either going to be Ms. H or H. So, Ira Haraharan, OGR Minority. Janet Kim, OGR Minority. Valerie Shen, Oversight Minority. Ted Lieu, Southern California. Raja Krishnamurthy, Illinois. Jason Dalton, FBI Congressional Affairs. Stupid watch. Chairman Bob Goodlatte, House Judiciary. Shelley Husband, Judiciary Committee Minority. Sharia Clark, Oversight and Government Reform Majority. Sean Brebbia, OGR Majority. Anudeep Budharaju, House Oversight Majority Staff. Megan Green, OGR Majority. Mr. Marino, Congressman Tom Marino, Pennsylvania 10 and member of the Judiciary Committee. Mike Johnson, Louisiana 4. Andy Biggs, Arizona. Eric Swalwell, California. Jerry Nadler, Ranking Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, and now the head of the committee. Ted Deutsch from Florida. Steve Cohen from Memphis. Steve King, Iowa 4, House Judiciary Committee. Not anymore. Louis Gohmert, Judiciary Committee, 1st District of Texas. Thomas Massey, OGR Kentucky. Matt Gaetz, 1st District of Florida, Judiciary. Back to Mr. Summers. The federal rules of civil procedure do not apply in this setting, but there are some guidelines that will follow that I'll go over. Our questioning will proceed in rounds. The majority will ask questions for the first hour, and then the minority will have the opportunity to ask questions for an equal period of time if they so choose. We will go back and forth in this manner until there are no more questions and the interview is over. Although a subpoena was issued, as I noted earlier, Mr. Strozk is appearing today voluntarily. Accordingly, we anticipate that our questions will receive complete responses. To the extent that Mr. Strozk declines to answer our questions, or if counsel instructs him not to answer, we will consider whether we need to proceed under our subpoena. Excuse me. Typically, we take a short break at the end of each hour of questioning, but if you would like to take an additional break apart from that, please let us know. We will also take a break for lunch at the appropriate point in time. I will be breaking for lunch at 12 o'clock, and I will come back at 12:30 our time, or Central Time, excuse me. So expect the stream to go off and then again start up again at 12:30. And then I'll record straight through till 6. Or was it? No, 5:30, excuse me. I'm going to go through till 5:30, and then I'll take a dinner break. I'll be back on at 6, and then I will read the rest of this in its entirety to the finish, no matter how long it takes. This will get done today. All right, back to the record. As you can see, there is an official reporter taking down everything we say to make a written record, so we ask that you give verbal responses to all questions. Do you understand this? Strozk, I do. Summers, so that the reporter can take down a clear record, we will do our best to limit the number of members and staff directing questions at you during any given hour to just those members and staff whose turn it is. It is important that we don't talk over one another or interrupt each other if we can help it. It makes it very difficult to read this transcript aloud when they do that, I can tell you that. Both committees encourage witnesses who appear for transcribed interviews to freely consult with counsel if they so choose, and you're appearing with counsel today. Could you please state your name and position for the record, Mr. Goldman? Eitan Goldman, Special Counsel for Special Agent Strozk. Excuse me, there's no special in front of counsel, it's just counsel. Summers, we want you to answer our questions in the most complete and truthful manner possible, so we will take our time. If you have any questions or you do not understand one of our questions, please just let us know. If you honestly don't know the answer to a question, or if you do not remember, it is best not to guess. Please just give us your best recollection. And it is okay to tell us if you learned the information from someone else. Just indicate how you came to know the information. If there are things you don't know or can't remember, just say so, and please inform us who, to the best of your knowledge, might be able to provide a more complete answer to the question. Mr. Strozk, you should also understand that, although this interview is not under oath, you are required by law to answer questions from Congress truthfully. Do you understand that? Strozk, I do. Summers, this also applies to questions posed by Congressional staff in an interview. Do you understand this? I do. Summers, witnesses who knowingly provide false testimony could be subject to criminal prosecution for perjury or for making false statements. Do you understand this? I do. Is there any reason you are unable to provide truthful answers to today's questions? No. Finally, I would like to note, as chairman of the Judiciary Committee stated at the outset of our first transcribed interview in this investigation, the content of what we discuss here today is confidential. Chairman Goodlatte and Chairman Gowdy asked that you do not speak about what we discuss in this interview to anyone not present here today to preserve the integrity of our investigation. This confidentiality rule applies to everyone present in the room today. This is the end of my preamble. Do you have any questions before we begin? Goldman, no questions. I just have a few brief comments for the record. As you indicated, Special Agent Strozk is here voluntarily and of his own free will. You stated that the committee anticipates that he's going to give complete answers to every question asked. Special Agent Strozk hopes that he can answer every question asked by the committee. He has no intention of invoking his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. There are certain questions that he is not going to be able to answer, and I just want to enumerate those categories and explain why. Any questions that breach a testimonial privilege, like the attorney-client privilege. I understand that the committee purports that these privileges do not apply in the committee testimony. I don't think that's the law, and I will be instructing Special Agent Strozk not to answer any questions that breach those privileges. If there are questions to which the answers impinge on FBI equities, Special Agent Strozk will follow the instructions of agency counsel who are here at the table. If there are questions to which the answers could contain classified information, Special Agent Strozk will be unable to provide that information since federal law prohibits divulging classified information in an unclassified setting, which my understanding is this is. Finally, all of Special Agent Strozk's answers here will be truthful and accurate to the best of his recollection. Regrettably, this committee is insistent that Special Agent Strozk testify this week, despite first contacting us last week and despite declining to provide us with a complete list of expected subject areas of questioning, has made it impossible for Special Agent Strozk to prepare as thoroughly as we would have liked, a dynamic that was exacerbated by Special Agent Strozk's difficulty in assessing some of his FBI materials because of the suspension of his security clearance, which was only restored a couple days ago. For these reasons, while Special Agent Strozk will answer questions to the best of his recollection sitting here today, some of his answers will not be as precise or fulsome as they would be had the committee not insisted on taking his testimony this week. Summers. I would just note for the record, and then we'll leave it at that the committee has requested, maybe not of you, but we have requested Mr. Strozk's appearance before the committee for quite some time now, and I would just, you can have your admonition about it, and I'll have mine. I will turn it over now to Mr. Baker to begin the first round of questioning. The time is 10:15. Baker, thank you. Swalwell, can I ask a quick point of order, Mr. Chairman? Why is the witness not under oath? Swalwell is such an idiot. Goodlot, because it's a voluntary interview. Swalwell, but if it's a penalty to lie to Congress anyway, what's the difference? It's just better for the committee if the witness is under oath, isn't it? Goodlat, I'll ask counsel to explain the difference between the two processes, but if he had appeared under subpoena, he would be sworn in under oath and it would be a different process followed. But I'm going to defer to Mr. Summers. Swalwell, I only bring this up because I've heard in the past that when Secretary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI, she wasn't under oath, and that was used as an attack against her. And I just want to make sure it's clear. Is the witness being offered to go under oath? Fucking Democrats. Summers, it is the practice of both committee, OGR, and judiciary not to swear witnesses for transcribed interviews. We would if Swalwell. So that's your decision, not the witnesses. Summers, that's the committee's practice. It's not my decision. It's the practice of Swalwell. But it's not the witness's decision. I just want to make sure. Summers, I do not know what the witness's preference is. We did not ask him. That's not the practice of either committee. Goldman, just for the record, the witness is willing to be sworn and willing to testify without being sworn as per the committee's practice. Summers, all right. Well, let's go ahead and start this. The time is now 10:15. So let's see. Swalwell was able to bleed. Let's see. He said it was 10:15 when they started. It can't still be 10:15. Anyway, that just gives you an idea of the delaying tactics you can expect to see. Okay. Mr. Baker. Okay. Just a quick reminder for folks that are participating from the table. Be cognizant of the microphones when you speak. Either bring them forward or lean forward just to make sure that what you're saying is heard by the folks that are doing the transcription and for the people that are participating from a place other than the table. Now we start the examination by Mr. Baker. Question. Now in these sections, you've got Mr. Baker asking the questions and Strozk making the answers. So when I say Q, that's by Baker, and when I say A, that's by Strozk. Q. Good morning, Mr. Strozk. Just as a very preliminary matter, what is the correct pronunciation of your name? I've heard it all different ways. I know you said it earlier, but I'd like you to just set the record straight on that. Strozk is the correct pronunciation. And I've been saying Strozk, so I'm glad to know that. Okay, and you are a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation? Yes. When did you enter on duty with the Bureau? I entered on duty with the Bureau in September of 1996. 1996. You are currently at the rank of Deputy Assistant Director. Is that correct? That's correct. And as a Deputy Assistant Director in the FBI is a fairly high rank, as I understand it. I would call it a mid-level senior executive. Okay? So you are a member of the Senior Executive Service. I am. And prior to your current assignment in the Human Resources Division, you were in the Counterintelligence Division. Yes. So, in the Counterintelligence Division, as a Deputy Assistant Director, who do you answer to? What is the rank structure in that division? So, within the Counterintelligence Division, my boss is Assistant Director, currently held by Bill Priestap. Not anymore. And then Counterintelligence Division is part of the National Security Branch, headed currently by Executive Assistant Director Carl Gaddis. Okay, and who does an Executive Assistant Director report to? The Deputy Director. So an EAD is fairly high up in the pecking order. Yes. The Assistant Director below that is who you answer to. That's correct. And then who answers to you? Who is below you in the structure? You're asking in the Counterintelligence Division? In Counterintelligence. Mr. Summers, we can't hear you down at this end of the table. If you could move the mic a little closer to you. Mr. Strozk. So, with the Counterintelligence Division, there were a variety of section chiefs. I don't know if the organization chart is classified, so let me try and see if I can answer that in way. Mr. Baker, just in general. Strozk. That satisfies your information. There are a variety of sections which are headed by Senior Executive Service Section Chiefs, which address a variety of threats globally from a counterintelligence perspective. Those are both by region as well as by nature of the threat. So there are 3 Deputy Assistant Directors within the Counterintelligence Division. My branch at the time had, I believe, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 Section Chiefs who handled a variety of both geographic, regional threats as well as topical threats. Okay, now back to questioning by Mr. Baker. Q. Okay, before you were promoted to Deputy Assistant Director, you yourself were a Section Chief. A. That's correct. And what section did you supervise? The espionage section. Okay. Very generally and very succinctly, what does the Counterintelligence Division do? What does a counterintelligence agent do? I mean, in an unclassified, just for people that might not understand what the difference in those types of investigations are from someone who's maybe working bank robberies. Answer. Absolutely. So there's a blend of both intelligence type work and investigations that go on as well as criminal work. Excuse me. Go on as well as criminal work. Lost my place. There we are. The way that the Bureau looks at counterintelligence is broadly any foreign adversary, any foreign national who is working to clandestinely work against American interests, whether that is the government of America, the executive branch, the legislative branch, or into areas of private industry through things like economic espionage. So the mission of the FBI domestically is to protect America, not only the government, but America broadly, against any number of foreign actors, the government of China, the government of Russia, anybody who has a foreign intelligence service working against us. Q. Okay, and part of those investigations, especially in your role in the counter-espionage section, could some of those investigations involve employees of the federal government? Yes. Okay, and that would be for espionage? Espionage, leaks of information to the media. You know, I can envision kind of one-off esoteric scenarios involving economic espionage, but those, okay, answer, would be the primary. Q. So the subjects of your investigations are not always just foreign actors. They could be employees that are possibly recruited or of interest by those foreign actors. Yes, that's correct. Okay. What did you do to prepare for your appearance and interview today? I reviewed material in the possession of the FBI. I worked with counsel. And yes, again, reviewing those materials that were online through, things that were released via FOIA or produced to Congress that were made public. And FOIA, of course, is Freedom of Information Act. Q. Have you met recently, either in preparation for this interview or for any reason, with any FBI employees or former employees that have come before the committee to be interviewed? A. For the purpose of preparation. Q. No, for any reason. A. Yes. And who was that? John Giacalone. I met probably 1.5, 2 weeks ago for lunch. And what is his role in the FBI? He's a retired executive assistant director. Did you report to him at all during the investigation that we're going to pivot to, Very? A. In a 2 layers removed place. Yes. Q. So he was an EAD at the beginning of this investigation that was code name Midyear. And the full name of that investigation was Midyear Exam, which was the Hillary Clinton email scandal investigation. Well, event. Certainly wasn't an investigation. A. Yes. Q. And your role at the very beginning was at what rank? A. I was an assistant special agent in charge in the Washington field office when Midyear predated. It started before I became involved. Q. Okay. Continuing. A lot of the questions we'll ask today, and I'll just get this out of the way, you've probably already been asked, you've probably already answered, but some have been reported in the media, but, as you're aware, the Judiciary Committee and the Oversight and Government Reform Committee are conducting their own investigation, and it's prudent for any investigator to give a de novo look at all the evidence. That's why we've requested and reviewed documents. That's why we're bringing witnesses in here and asking some of the questions you've probably already been asked. Within the last week or 2 weeks, there was a media reporting that you were escorted out of the FBI building and that your security clearances were suspended. Is that correct? Yes. I would add, they are reinstated as of this last weekend for the purpose of allowing me to review material in the FBI's possession and appear here today. Q. So they were reinstated for the purpose of today's appearance, not for the purpose of your position at the FBI. I do not know the entirety of the reasons they were reinstated. One of the reasons that I am aware of is that they were related so I could review the material and appear here today. Q. Okay. You may not know the answer to this, but I'm very curious. You have been, at some point, we'll get into this later, you were transferred from the Counterintelligence Division to the Human Resources Division, but you've been in place during the pendency of the various investigations, the various media reporting, significantly, during the Inspector General's investigation. You've been in place and doing bureau business, different than what you were used to doing, but still on the rolls and in the building doing things. What has happened recently that the FBI management, executive management, felt there was a need to have you removed from the building? A. So, 2 answers to that. 1. Answering it would call for a speculation. And the second thing is, my understanding of the FBI's personal disciplinary process is one which I'm bound by confidentiality, and I can't talk about what I do know. Okay, but you are still an FBI employee. I am. Have you been proposed for any discipline, or that's under review? Again, my understanding is I can't get into discussion about the particulars of the disciplinary process. But you are currently a paid FBI employee. Yes, I am. Okay, so you are not suspended in any way. Well, I am suspended from, I'm not able to report for work within the FBI building, but that's a function of what's going on with the security process. But beyond that, I don't think I can comment on the process. Okay, so you're not in the building because your clearances have been suspended, not because you're under any kind of discipline that's already been handed out. My understanding is that I cannot go into the building because my clearances are suspended. Okay, and do you have any idea what the duration of the suspension for clearances will be other than this temporary one? A. I don't. Okay. Mr. Jordan. We're still having trouble hearing. Can we have the witness? Just if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Strozk. Just really, no, just pull the mic right up like that. That way we can hear down here. Thank you. Now questioning by Mr. Breitenbach. Q. You have been informed why you were walked out and why you have lost your security clearance. I have been told that my security clearance has been suspended. But have you been given the reasons as to why it was suspended? I think getting into the reasons gets into the area of confidentiality that, I understand, but were you told by the Bureau, A, I have been informed within the process and procedures of the FBI disciplinary process those elements that employees are told about, and my understanding is I'm not at liberty to further discuss that. Okay. Now back to Mr. Baker. And you've been giving no timetable as to how long it would take whoever is reviewing your clearances for a resolution of that matter. I have not. And no idea why all of a sudden this became an issue, because you've been in place doing essentially FBI function, although in a different division, during the pendency of the various investigations, and it hasn't been an issue up until now. A, I'm sorry, there are a couple of issue questions in there. Q, your clearances haven't been an issue during the pendency of the Inspector General's report and the various other reports. By the way, that Inspector General's report, I read that last year on my now shuttered, although still live, HATS Guerrilla News channel. So you can go back and listen to that. It's about 28 hours of different segments, but I got it in there. So if you have a cross-country drive and you need something to listen to, then you're interested in the IG report, well, there it is. Okay, enough advertising. Okay, backing up. Your clearances haven't been an issue during the pendency of the Inspector General's report and the various other reports, but all of a sudden it seems like something happened, that you have been taken out of the building and your clearance is revoked, that whenever happened didn't happen during all of this time that the investigations have been going on. A, right. My understanding is that is part of the of the Bureau's disciplinary process. Q, okay. What was your role? Actually, before we get to that, have you always been a counterintelligence agent? Have you worked other violations, or has that pretty much been your career? A, no. I started as an analyst working domestic terrorism and weapons of mass destruction related to domestic terrorism. As a first office agent, I worked national security matters broadly. That was largely counterintelligence, but not exclusively CI. I did some terrorism work as well. Just taking a drink. On your way from new agent out of Quantico to Deputy Assistant Director, in addition to substantive expertise in terrorism, counterintelligence, I believe you have probably, to get a DAD rank, you probably also have been required to do various managerial things and to accomplish certain managerial milestones in a career development program. Is that correct? Yes. As a part of that, you have had various lower-level supervisory roles evaluated and promoted to other supervisory roles, correct? Yes. And part of that has been, I am assuming, but correct me, you have done inspections of other field offices, other headquarter entities, other FBI entities. Yes. Q. And an inspection involves you going in and taking a step back, looking at and analyzing another office, another FBI entity, another agent's work, to make sure it's in compliance with the law, in compliance with administrative guidelines, and ultimately looking to see if the resources, human and monetary resources, put into that investigation are ultimately, at the end of your inspection, efficient and effective. Is that correct? Yes. So my point in all of that is, because of you doing all that, you are uniquely qualified as a DAD to look at an investigation, to run an investigation, to participate in the investigation of an investigation, because you have a really good handle on what an investigation is supposed to look like based on your investigative experience and your managerial experience. You've been trained to evaluate programs. You'll know what a good investigation should look like. Is that correct? I would not say it's unique, but I would say that it's true. it is true, I would say, of people who have gone through that path and done those things and arrived at that same position. Q. Okay. So, as it pertains to the investigation known as mid-year exam, what was your role in that? I'm sure it changed, or you can correct me if it didn't, but my understanding with that, and any investigation, it's opened up, and then once people actually start looking at it, it evolves to either what you thought it might evolve to when you first looked at it, or maybe something different based on facts and circumstances that you see. What was your initial role in mid-year exam? A. My initial role, I was an assistant special agent in charge at FBI's Washington field office. The case had been opened out of headquarters by then Assistant Director Coleman. I know Section Chief Sandy Cable was also involved in the effort. At some point, I would say months in, maybe less than 2 months, but certainly after some time of running, they reached out to the FBI's Washington field office and said they needed greater staffing based on what they were looking at, based on some of the investigative steps that were under consideration, that they wanted to bring in field elements to work on that investigation. And so that was my first exposure to it and my entry into the investigation. Q. So why would this matter, or this case have been opened up by FBI headquarters as the Office of Origin, for lack of a better term, and not opened up at the Washington field office? A. I don't know, because I was not present when it occurred. My understanding is that decision was made by senior executives at the FBI, certainly at and likely above Assistant Director Coleman's level, but I don't know what the reasoning or discussion was as to why that occurred. Q. In the normal course of business, would a case have been opened up at the Washington field office as the Office of Origin? A. The typical, I don't know how to define normal for you. The ordinary course of business is that cases are opened up out of field offices and run and supervised there. I'm also aware of circumstances where cases are opened or have been opened and run out of FBI headquarters. Q. Okay, so this was not the first time a case had been opened and run from headquarters. That's correct. But in the normal course of business, it's kind of unusual. Again, saying something's normal course of business and then saying something's unusual are kind of differences. It's not the typical case, but this was not the first in my experience. Q. Okay. How did it come to be that this particular case was classified in the Bureau's classification system as to where the case would land, where it would ultimately be investigated from? How was it that it was classified as a counterintelligence matter versus something maybe on the criminal side of the house, a public corruption case or something like that? And how did it end up in counterintelligence? A. I don't know. That was a decision made before and above my level. Q. Would it be that any matter relating to, in very general terms, a spillage of potentially classified information, that is where that particular investigation or any potential criminal violations that went with that, that's just where those matters would be investigated from? A. Well, we don't investigate spills of classified information. That's typically an administrative process is followed. For any potentially criminal matters involving classified information, that is typically within the arena of the Counterintelligence Division. Okay. Questioning by Mr. Breitenbach. Going back real quickly, you mentioned you were ASAC of WFO when the investigation began. That's correct. Who was the assistant director in charge of WFO at the time? I believe that was then Assistant Director Andy McCabe, but I would have to refresh my recollection. I know he was there at some point during that time at WFO, but when I first became aware of it, I'd need to check notes and material. And in case you've gotten in the weeds of the acronyms, WFO is Washington Field Office. Q. Were you the only agent at the time at WFO that was brought over to headquarters to work the case? No. Are you aware of how many agents in total were brought over from WFO? I am. I could be aware with a review of materials, speaking from recollection, and this is going to be a kind of vague. There was a supervisory special agent, a significant portion of his squad made up of both agents and analysts, augmented by various computer forensic personnel, analytic personnel. So roughly, and it varied throughout the course of the investigation, anywhere from 10 to 20 WFO personnel. But that's a vague recollection, and I wouldn't want to say I'm absolutely certain about that number. Q. So Mr. McCabe, running the office in the Washington field office, would he be aware why individuals were leaving WFO to go to headquarters to run a case? A. My recollection in this case is that he was not. I would defer to my boss, I think it was SAC Greg Cox, I believe, about any discussions, but I did not have discussion with Mr. McCabe about what we were doing at headquarters. Q. So you left WFO, went to headquarters. You did not discuss the reasons why you were leaving an office to go to headquarters with Mr. McCabe. A. My recollection is I did not discuss with Mr. McCabe the reasons why the team was going to WFO or from WFO to headquarters. Questioning by Mr. Baker. We've entertained some questions and tried to figure out what the term means, and that has been associated with this particular investigation. A quote-unquote special, a quote-unquote headquarters special. What is that designation as it is assigned to an investigation that the FBI is doing? So I think special is a term that was used in previous, earlier Bureau times. And that was something where a task force would be created. My recollection is that there was frequently with a particular costing and administrative process would be set up so that resources could be tracked and funded as part of support of something that special. Excuse me. My mouth gets very dry. I've got some coffee. Again, my recollection is that something was done much earlier in the FBI and that we don't tend to. The formal structure of a special is not the same as, kind of the colloquial use of it. So I certainly have heard that used. I would say it is more accurate simply to say that it was an investigation where the personnel were at FBI headquarters. They were largely made up of Washington Field and FBI headquarters personnel. Q. So, to be clear, it sounds like the term special, either in an older FBI, and maybe the term is just carried over. It meant how something administratively was done with the case, not the subject matter of the case. Answer. Both. I mean, typically, I think it was an administrative process, but there was also a recognition that, if there was a major terrorist event, or if there was a major kidnapping or violent crime or something, where you were creating an investigation that merited a special process, which I can't define to you today. I'm sure if we pulled out an old MAOP or MIOG, no idea, documents that haven't existed for 20 years, they might define special, but it was a not unprecedented practice to create an entity like that to investigate. Q. So you were recruited for the mid-year exam investigation. Did they solicit applications? How did you come to be on the team? My understanding is that Assistant Director Coleman asked for me and a team to come over, but that's secondhand information. I don't know that Mr. Coleman ever told me. I don't know that I know exactly how it came to be that I was selected and directed to go to headquarters. I have heard that you are regarded as the #1 counterintelligence agent in the world. Comment on that? A. That's kind for whoever said it. I believe there are a number of very competent, qualified FBI agents who have spent their careers working counterintelligence, love the work, love protecting America, and I would count myself in that group. Q. So you would be a logical resource for the FBI to go to for a matter that ended up in the Counterintelligence Division? Yes. At any time, either yourself or anybody else that came onto the team, was there any assessment other than your expertise in particular violations? Was there ever an assessment of political bias or political activity beyond what would just be normal for a rank-and-file employee anywhere to, go and vote or participate in the process like that? A. Are you asking were political beliefs taken into account in a staffing perspective? Yes. No, they were not. Okay. What was your understanding in general terms for now of what the mid-year exam investigation was about? You're on it now. What's it about? A. My understanding broadly was at least one, whether or not classified information came to be placed on Secretary Clinton's servers and email accounts? If so, how that came to be, and if so, whether or not that information had been compromised or otherwise accessed by a foreign power. Q. Okay. We're going to get back into that a little bit. I want to pivot just briefly. This is something that's been widely reported, but I have a question beyond, I think, what the obvious interest in the media has been, and I think you're uniquely qualified to answer that. It's been widely reported. The Inspector General's report makes a reference to it, so I'm assuming it's true. You were involved in an extramarital affair at the Bureau. Yes. Q. In your role as a counterintelligence expert, is an extramarital affair, and I mean that in its truest sense, not known by the spouse, is that a situation, a scenario, that makes the person committing or involved in the affair vulnerable to potential recruitment by a hostile intelligence service? A. Yeah, I don't think I would characterize it that way. I think it is not so much any particular action as it is the way that action might be used to coerce or otherwise get somebody to do something. I can tell you in no way would that extramarital affair have any power in coercing me to do anything other than obeying the law and doing honest, competent investigation. Not exactly what it looked like you did on the mid-year exam, but maybe that's just me. Right, back to the questions. But it would be something that an intelligence service, if they're looking for a vulnerability, if they're looking for someone that is an employee of the U.S. government doing the sensitive types of investigations that the FBI does, if there were a recruitment effort or a desire by a hostile service to penetrate that particular government entity, would that be a vulnerability that they would look at and assess to potentially try to exploit? A. I think there are a variety of factors that would be looked at by any government to, again, the issue is not the particular activity, but the way in which those activities or desires might be used to persuade or coerce somebody to work for a foreign intelligence service. Well, that's kind of doublespeak right there. The particular activity is part of the reason that they would use those activities or desires to persuade or coerce someone, because they wouldn't want that activity to be known. I had understood that Strozk engaged in a fair piece of doublespeak during his closed-door hearing, and this is where it's starting to pop up, it looks like. I don't know if he was as completely insufferable during this as he was during his open-door hearing, or open session hearing, as you can see by a couple of the pictures I've got on the left of the screen there. Those are from that, but who knows? Who knows? Q. You were never approached by a foreign intelligence service? No. Hypothetically, if you were, with the affair pending over you, and that is what the intelligence service brought or assessed to be a vulnerability, how would you respond? Answer. I would absolutely respond not, and well, getting into, terms of art here. One argument is you would tell the service, let me get back to you. I would immediately go report that to my superiors and see how they wanted to follow up. But it is, I absolutely would not have been vulnerable or even let alone consider any sort of recruitment attempt. Q. Okay, we're Mr. Ratcliffe. May I jump in? Mr. Baker. Yes, sir. Mr. Ratcliffe. Agent Strozk. A number of us have other obligations today, so we'll be coming back and forth and may not be able to hear the entirety of your testimony. So I wanted to make sure I got to a couple of things before some members have to leave. We'll come back to mid-year exam, but just chronologically, I'm trying to get a picture of the roles that you played throughout all the investigations that are subject to our jurisdiction that we're asking questions about. So, in addition to the mid-year exam, you were involved in an investigation regarding potential Russian interference into our election, correct? Strozk, yes. Ratcliffe, okay, and when did that begin? It began late July of 2017. Okay, and was, 16. Ratcliffe, 16. And is that the investigation that's referred to by code name Crossfire Hurricane? Yeah, and of course is the opening of the Russian collusion investigation into Trump before the Mueller team came on board. Strozk, Sir, I can't get into that in an unclassified setting. Okay. Can you tell us when you first learned about that investigation? Yes. At the time it was opened, in late July of 2016. Okay. And what was your initial role with respect to that investigation? My initial role was as a supervisor over a series of subordinate supervisors and elements who were conducting the investigation. At the time, I was a section chief and was shortly thereafter promoted to deputy assistant director. Excuse me. Ratcliffe. Okay. It's been reported that that investigation began on or about July 27th of 2016. Strozk. I don't think the specific date has been declassified. Ratcliffe. Okay. It has also been reported that you were in charge of leading that investigation. Is that a fair characterization? I would say I was among the leadership structure. I was one of the senior leaders. But the investigative structure involved certainly subordinate supervisors and subordinate supervisors to them, as well as case agents and analysts. Me, AD Prestep, were all involved in a leadership capacity. Ratcliffe. Would you have been involved in putting together an investigative plan? Yes. Would you have been in charge or played a role in managing confidential human sources? Typically, that's done at a lower supervisory level. Typically it is, but Strozk. Redacted. Ratcliffe. Okay. So what was your official title with respect to the Russia investigation? My title was first initially as the section chief of the counter-espionage section, and later as the deputy assistant director of Branch 1 of the counterintelligence division. Ratcliffe, section chief, and then became what? Strozk, deputy assistant director. Ratcliffe, and when did that change take place, and why did it take place? Sir, I was promoted. I believe it was October of that year. It might have been September. I would have to check my personnel records. Okay. Did you open what we would refer to as the Russia investigation? Strozk, I can't answer that in an unclassified setting. Ratcliffe, how long were you on what we're calling the Russia investigation? Strozk, well, so I would correct your use of the word on. It was an area of which elements were under my subordinate supervisor's supervision for the pendency of my time in counterintelligence division and work at the special counsel's office. There's no way I could read that again and figure it out. I didn't understand that at all. Ratcliffe, okay, so at some point you mentioned special counsel. At what point were you assigned to the special counsel investigation? Strozk, I was assigned to the investigation and again I don't have the specific dates, but it was shortly after the establishment of the office. If memory serves, it was I'm sure it was the late spring of 2017, but I don't have a specific date. Ratcliffe, yeah, May 17 of 2017 is the order appointing special counsel. Strozk, it was after that. Ratcliffe, Mueller, how soon after? Strozk, again my recollection is probably within a month, but I'm not certain about that. Shortly after the creation, but it was certainly weeks after the creation. Ratcliffe, and you were part of the initial group of folks that were assigned to the special counsel, or were you added to the special counsel probe? Strozk, again, initial is a kind of ill-defined word. I was not the first person assigned. I wouldn't be able to tell you sequentially how many people were assigned, but I was assigned, I would say, relatively early in the process. Ratcliffe, okay. You mentioned earlier Ms. Page, Lisa Page. Was she assigned before or after you? I believe she was assigned before. Do you know if her involvement had anything to do with your addition to the special counsel team? I don't know. I don't believe so. Okay. Who was it that approached you about being appointed to or involved with the special counsel investigation? I don't remember specifically who. I remember that was a combination of discussions between special counsel staff, the special counsel, and the FBI, but I don't recall who it was who first approached me about that. Excuse me just a second. Dry lips. Ratcliffe, at what point in time was the Russia investigation At that point in time, was the Russia investigation still active? Yes. Okay. Were you still one of the folks leading that investigation? I was one of the people involved in the leadership structure of that. Yes. Okay. And is it fair for me to say, if you were involved in the leadership structure, that you were involved in taking actions and making decisions regarding the gathering or collecting of evidence or information? Strozk, yes. And I would add to that, sir, that what's difficult here in an unclassified setting is to explain the structure of things. And so, without getting into any classified territory, I think it would be fair to say that I certainly had a supervisory role, but there were a variety of other people who were involved in supervisory roles. Ratcliffe, so explain for us how, if at all, the information that was gathered, evidence that was gathered or collected that we've just talked about from the Russia investigation, became part of the special counsel investigation. Strozk, I don't think I can answer that in an unclassified setting. I can tell you that FBI rules and policies and procedures were followed throughout the conduct of the investigation. Now, let me interject here. During the Lisa Page testimony that I read Friday and yesterday, there was a lot of digging into these areas of classified sections, and there were a ton of redactions on the pages due to that. So either Page was much less reluctant or less sophisticated in answering these questions, or Strozk is just avoiding implicating himself quite effectively. Could be something else. Those are just the first two things that come to mind. But so far in this, there's been one redaction, and in the Lisa Page interview, there were quite a few. Now, we're early into this. There's still a ways to go. But at the moment where they're asking these questions, for there to be only one redaction, I think Strozk is doing himself well in his answers. The committee doesn't seem to be getting to him that much. I'll go back to Strozk. I don't think I can answer that in an unclassified setting. I can tell you that FBI rules and policies and procedures were followed throughout the conduct of the investigation. Swalwell, Mr. Chairman, a point of order. Okay, they aren't using federal rules, point of order rules during this. If we can make the room right, this room is a skiff, and go into a classified setting, I'd move that we do that if the testimony is calling for, Chairman Goodlatte, rather than going in and out, I would ask you to remember what questions are asked that require a classified setting, and then we can address that further on in the process. Ratcliffe, but you can, without getting into the details, you can confirm that evidence or information from the Russia investigation ultimately became part of the special counsel investigation. Strozk, I'm concerned from both a classification perspective as well as I defer to Bureau counsel about whether or not we want to get into a discussion about ongoing investigations, and I'm not certain the Bureau wants that. Mr. Ratcliffe, again, I'm not getting into the specifics of the information, but I think it's important for everyone to understand the connection, if there is one, between the Russia investigation and the special counsel matter, in which you obviously were involved in both. Bessie, Congressman, to the extent that he may be sort of encroaching on the special counsel territory, I think he's going to be very cautious. Ratcliffe, I have no problem with that. All I'm asking for is confirmation that the work that was done, whatever that work was done, these related decisions were made, actions were taken, evidence was gathered and collected, that the sum and substance of that, at least in part, transferred over or became part of the consideration of the special counsel. Bessie, to the extent you know the answer, Pete. Strozk, so would you restate the question? Ratcliffe, yeah. I'm just asking you to confirm whether the information or evidence that was gathered and collected as part of the Russia investigation, where you were making decisions and taking actions, whether any of that became part of the special counsel's probe and consideration. Strozk, yes. Ratcliffe, all right. So, when you became part of the special counsel team sometime in May of 2017, how long did you continue and in what role? Strozk. I was there until the beginning of August. I was essentially one of the lead agents involved in the office. Ratcliffe. Lead agents? Strozk. In a more kind of supervisory oversight. There were, and again, I don't want to get into the specifics of staffing, but my role was at a more senior level than... I'm pausing because I don't want to talk about... Ratcliffe. Let me ask you this. Strozk. The special counsel staffing structure. Ratcliffe. Were the actions that you were taking and the decisions you were making in the special counsel probe similar to or consistent with the same ones that you had been taking in the Russia investigation? Strozk. No. I would say they were reduced, inasmuch as the special counsel and the structure of that office was more my analogy is, kind of in the conduct of a criminal investigation, there comes a point where the agent's role lowers and the attorney's role rises, and that the special agent counsel's office and the attorneys were in more of a leadership role of that process. Ratcliffe. Okay. The Inspector General report indicates that you were removed from the special counsel investigation team on or about August 27th of 2017. Does that date sound correct? Strozk. No, I think it was earlier. Ratcliffe. Okay. Do you know? Well, tell us the circumstances by which you were removed to the best of your recollection and understanding. My recollection is that there was a brief discussion between me, the special counsel, and one of his attorneys, a discussion of his desire and, expression that he thought it would be appropriate for me to return to the FBI. Okay, so a brief conversation with the special counsel and his attorney. No, not one of the staff of the special counsel's office. Who was that? I would defer to the special counsel to discuss the matters within his administration of that office. Yeah, this guy's slick. Ratcliffe. Okay, but when you say the special counsel, you're referring to Robert Mueller. I am. So you had a brief conversation with Robert Mueller about your removal from his investigative team. I did. Okay, on or about what date? Again, sir, it is knowable, so if I refresh my recollection with my calendar, but my recollection is it was in the early August time frame. Okay. How long was that brief conversation to the best of your recollection? I don't recall. Less than 30 minutes. More than... I don't recall. All right. In the less than 30 minutes that you talked with Special Counsel Robert Mueller, did he give you reasons why you were being removed? We discussed generally the existence of the text messages. And what do you remember about the conversation as it pertained to the text messages? My recollection was there was a sense of regret. There was a sense that Special Counsel Mueller absolutely wanted to run an investigation that was not only independent, but also presented the appearance of independence, and the concern that these texts might be construed otherwise. And that was the substance of it. Excuse me. If Mueller had wanted a team that appeared independence as well as be independent, I don't think he would have necessarily hired Weissman, but that's just me. All right, back to the questioning. Ratcliffe. Okay, in that less than 30-minute conversation with Special Counsel Mueller, did you review any of the individual texts? No. Did Special Counsel Mueller or the other lawyer, who you can't recall or that you defer, did you say you couldn't recall? Oh, I recall. I defer to the Special Counsel for discussions of personnel. Ratcliffe. There were two, a Special Counsel and a lawyer from the investigative Strozk. That's correct. Ratcliffe. Okay. Did either one of them ask you about any individual or specific texts? No. Did either one of them ask you whether or not well, first of all, let me just generally, do you think it's fair, as these texts have been characterized, do you think it's fair to say that there were hateful texts with respect to Donald Trump? I wouldn't call them hateful. I would call them an expression of personal belief in an individual conversation with a close associate. Well, if you wouldn't call them hateful, Mr. Strozk, then they're not hateful, I'm sure. That's me editorializing. Ratcliffe. Did you have any discussion with Special Counsel Mueller or the other attorney about whether or not those text messages reflected biases or prejudice against Donald Trump? No. Did Special Counsel Mueller or the other attorney in the room ask you whether or not your expression of personal belief about Donald Trump influenced any of the actions or decisions that you had taken or any of the evidence or information that you had gathered? No. In looking at the specific texts on August 6th of 2016, one of the texts that you sent to Ms. Page, you said, F Trump. Do you recall that? I recall reading that. I don't recall specifically sending that, but I've read it, yes. Do you have any reason to doubt the veracity of that text? I do not. Okay. So, did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone with the Special Counsel investigative team make any inquiry as to whether or not any bias or prejudice reflected in that text that I just referred to impacted any actions or decisions or the manner in which the evidence you gathered that information was affected? Strozk. So, if you're asking whether or not if any of my personal beliefs ever influenced any, Ratcliffe, no, I'm asking you, Strozk, official action, the answer to that is never. Ratcliffe, I'm not asking that question. I'm asking you whether the Special Counsel or anyone with the Special Counsel's investigative team made inquiry to you whether or not any bias or prejudice that would be reflected in the text F Trump impacted any actions that you took, any decisions you made, any information or evidence that you gathered. No. All right. That very same day you sent a text to Ms. Page saying that you can protect the country at many levels. Do you recall that? Sir, I think that is, chronologically, I think that was earlier than the August 2017 time frame. Ratcliffe, no, it was August. Do you all have a copy of the text messages? I can provide. Strozk, right, but I believe that's a full year prior, sir, not 2017. Ratcliffe, oh, okay, yeah. August 6th of 2016, you sent a text message that said, I can protect the country at many levels. Strozk, that is part of a larger text, yes. Ratcliffe, okay. Did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone with the Special Counsel investigative team make any inquiry to you as to what you meant by that? Strozk, no. Ratcliffe, did they make any inquiry as to whether or not, when you said I can protect the country at many levels, that reflected any bias or prejudice against Donald Trump? Strozk, did they ask? Yes. Strozk, no. Ratcliffe, did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on the investigative team ask you whether or not what you stated in that text message in any way impacted the actions or decisions that you took or the manner in which you collected evidence or information? No. Ratcliffe, on August 8th of 2016, in a response to a text message from Lisa Page making inquiry as to whether or not Donald Trump would become president, you responded, no, he's not. We'll stop it. Correct? Yes. Did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone with the Special Counsel investigative team make any inquiry as to whether or not what is reflected in that text impacted your actions or decisions or the manner in which you collected evidence either as part of the Russia investigation or during your involvement with the Special Counsel team? Obviously a pattern here, very evident. Mr. Strozk answers no. Ratcliffe, on August 15th of 2016, you sent a text message to Ms. Page saying, I want to believe the path that you set forth in Andy's office, but feel we can't take that risk. Do you remember saying that? I remember reading the text and having that refresh my memory. You don't have any reason to doubt the veracity of that text. No, I do not. All right. And is the risk that you were talking about the risk of a Trump presidency? It is not. Now, I can't wait to hear his explanation for this. Ratcliffe, what was the risk that was reflected in that? Strozk, my recollection of that discussion was that we had received information from a very sensitive source alleging collusion between the government of Russia and members of the Trump campaign. As is frequently the case in counterintelligence investigations and any national security investigations, there is a tension between the protection of a sensitive source and method in pursuing the investigation related to that information. Ratcliffe, okay. Strozk, there was a debate. If I may, sir, finish, because it's important to understand the context of what I said. The debate was how aggressively to pursue the investigation, given that aggressive pursuit might put that intelligence source at risk. This is in keeping with some of Page's testimony, just so you know. And there were some who looked and said, well, the polls are overwhelmingly in Secretary Clinton's favor. We cannot risk this source by just not really investigating that aggressively. And my perspective was, we need to do our job. We're FBI, we need to investigate. The country deserves this. If there is a problem within the membership of the Trump campaign that, if they are elected, that these people might be named to senior national security positions, and that is something certainly that the American people deserve, and indeed candidate Trump might want to know. So my use of the phrase insurance policy was simply to say, while the polls or people might think it is less likely that then candidate Trump would be elected, that should not get in the way of us doing our job responsibly to protect the national security. Okay, so he said the unlikely event was reference to Trump being elected, but that they would need an insurance policy. And he's saying that insurance policy was just that if Trump would get elected, that it should not influence, quote, that should not get in the way of doing our job responsibly to protect the national security. Now, this comes up in Page's testimony quite often. She says that they had strong leads, that may be my term, but it's a fair inference, strong leads and good information that the Trump campaign was in the bag with Russia. But they didn't want to pursue it too aggressively because they might burn sources by releasing what they knew. Even if they didn't release the name of the source, people would be able to figure out who the source was by the information that had come out. So they didn't want to burn these sources by investigating aggressively. And that's kind of what Strozk almost says here, but not quite. He really muddies the waters here. He really clouds things up. But the question one has to ask, questions, is one, they knew that Trump wasn't involved. They had no evidence of that whatsoever. So why not give the Trump team a defensive briefing and say, there are some possible bad people trying to influence your staff, wittingly or unwittingly. They may be going along with it. You need to know about this, and you need to keep an eye out for it. Certain things may come in front of you, etc., etc., etc. They didn't do that. So then the other part of it is, why is it more important to investigate it fully if Trump's elected than to slow roll it because there's a really, really slim chance that he will be elected? If the Russians are interfering in the electoral process that significantly, shouldn't that be nipped in the bud right away, as opposed to letting it run its course and then making it to where people who were influenced by the Russians become people in power and then have to remove them? That seems absolutely ridiculous. Why would you wait for people who are possibly contaminated by the Russians, if I may use that phrase? Why would you wait for them to become people with responsibilities in the government? That's ridiculous. It's the way I see it, and I'm not the first to say this, but still. The way I see it is, they had nothing on the Trump campaign that was legitimate. They had spurious sources picking things out of context, like the poor Papadopoulos interview or meeting with Snowden, the Australian High Commissioner in Great Britain. Is that his name, Snowden? I don't think that's right. Might be. But you know who I'm talking about. Anyway, that drunken conversation he had with him that said nothing about Russia emails in regards to what the FBI is talking about. It was an offhand remark that had nothing to do with anything. Yet they're saying that was the basis of their investigation. before the Steele dossier came in, which we found out came in a lot earlier than they claim it did. So all this is just going to the point that they had nothing on Trump. They had nothing on his campaign. So there was nothing for them to investigate that would, quote, burn a source, unquote. They had nothing. This is all smoke and mirrors. All right. Back to Mr. Ratcliffe. Okay. So who is the source of that information and when did you receive it? Sir, I can't get into that in an open setting. Well, you were asked about this text message by the Inspector General, correct? I was. And the Inspector General also asked you whether or not it was reasonable for people to assume that the risk that you were talking about was Donald Trump based in light or based upon other messages, text messages, that you sent about Donald Trump, correct? Strozk. I don't remember the phrasing and questions from the Inspector General. Ratcliffe. Do you remember telling the IG that you thought it would be reasonable for people to have that assumption based on the other text messages that you sent about Trump? Strozk. I absolutely, whatever is recorded in his report and my transcript, would agree with, but I would say that there are a variety of interpretations. What I'm telling you, because I wrote it, it means we need to err on the side of aggressively investigating this and not just, Ratcliffe. I understand that, but I'm asking you, do you think it's reasonable for other people to have a different interpretation of what you meant by that when they read it in context with other text messages? I think it's reasonable that people would have any number of interpretations of things. Ratcliffe. Okay, and what you're telling us, though, is that Robert Mueller didn't make inquiry into either of those, yours or anyone else's interpretations. I don't know what he did or didn't do. I can only speak to what he talked or asked me. That's the conversation, dude. Ratcliffe. Right. Well, you're the only one that would be able to give that interpretation, right? Strozk. Sir, I don't know who he might have, between the IG or anybody else, who he might have spoken to. I can tell you with regard to me, he did not. Ratcliffe. Right. So he didn't even make inquiry. Strozk. With me, he did not ask. Ratcliffe. All right. When you joined the Special Counsel investigative team, shortly before you did, you sent a text message to Lisa Page where you talked about unfinished business and the need to fix it and finish it. Did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on the Special Counsel investigative team make any inquiry to you as to whether or not that text message related to Donald Trump? Strozk. No. Ratcliffe. Did it relate to Donald Trump? Sir, in my recollection, that referred to a much broader effort of the government of Russia to interfere with our presidential election. I saw that from our observation, from information from the U.S. intelligence community that has since been declassified, that the government of Russia, in social media and other places, were making use of the Clinton investigation in a way to disrupt our election. There was a recess. It's now 11:05 a.m. Strozk. I was concerned in that context that the work that we had done that was professional and extraordinary and complete was being twisted and turned in a way by a foreign adversary to undermine our electoral process. It had nothing to do with the fact that more than half the country thought you guys had botched the investigation and were doing a hatchet job on it. It was Russia who was running it. Okay. So if you disagree with the FBI or the DOJ or the CIA or the NSA or any of those people, you're a Russian bot. Good to know. And so as I looked at that going on, as I looked at my background in the mid-year case and my career's work against hostile foreign powers, my sense was I wanted to continue the work of making sure that, in fact, the government of Russia would not be successful in interfering with our election, that they would not be successful in using the investigative results of the FBI with regard to the Clinton server. Pretty self-serving. Ratcliffe. Well, I know a lot of members are going to have questions regarding what you mean by that, but again, to be clear, Special Counsel Mueller and no one on his investigative team just heard the explanation that you gave for what the text message meant because they didn't ask about it, right? Strozk, that's a two-part question. They did not ask about it of me. I don't know what they heard. Ratcliffe, okay, that same day you talked about an investigation leading to impeachment. Are we talking about impeachment of Donald Trump? Strozk, I don't. Yes. I don't know if it was the same day, but I defer to your notes. Ratcliffe, I'll represent to you that it's a text message dated May 18 of 2017. Did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on the Special Counsel investigative team make an inquiry to you as to whether or not your reference to impeachment related to Donald Trump? No. Did they make any inquiry as to whether or not the text message that you sent talking about the impeachment of Donald Trump in any way impacted the actions or decisions that you took or the manner in which you had gathered evidence, either in the Russian investigation or as part of Robert Mueller's special counsel team? No. On that same day, May 18, 2017, in the text message to Ms. Page, you talked about whether or not to join the special counsel investigative team and said, if I thought it was likely, let me read it to you exactly because I don't want to paraphrase. You said, you and I both know the odds are nothing. If I thought it was likely, I'd be there, no question. I hesitate in part because of my gut sense and concern there's no big there. Do you remember sending that text message? Strozk, I don't remember sending it, but I believe it to be true and my words. Okay, the odds are nothing about what? So my recollection, my thought at the time, was we had a credible allegation that the government of Russia had offered assistance to elements and members of the Trump team in the election. Our look, which was still ongoing, and I believe to still be ongoing, it was not clear to me based on the investigators' skepticism whether we didn't know what we had, whether this was a large, coordinated activity, or whether this was a group of people pursuing their own agendas or, their own motivations or desires, and not knowing at that point whether or not what that interaction might have been or what it was. Ratcliffe, so you said, Meadows, can I ask one clarification? Ratcliffe, yeah, you can. Meadows, you indicated that there was evidence. There was evidence that Russia was trying to do it. There was evidence the other way around. There was no evidence the other way around. Is that correct? Strozk, sir, Meadows, I want you to be clear in that Russia was trying. Strozk, I understand your question, and I can't answer with a specificity that you would like in an unclassified setting. Meadows, well, you just answered with specificity the other way. So I'm guessing what I'm saying is, based on what I know, I want to give you a chance to clarify the record. Absolutely, sir. And what I would tell you is, my statements, my recollection just now, is that I was talking about the initial allegations that we had received that have been talked about and described. Meadows, that Russia was trying to interfere? Strozk, right. And what I don't want to do, though, is to extrapolate into your second question, which is whether or not there is any reciprocity because there's a difference between the sum and substance of the initial. Meadows, but you were extrapolating based on your answer. So, and again, I'm just trying to get clarification. Goldman, yeah, if you'd like clarification, I'd ask the congressman to allow the witness to finish his answer. Strozk, so sir, I would. As to the second question as to whether or not there was information about whether elements of the Trump campaign were themselves engaging in that, I can't answer that in an unclassified setting. And furthermore, I don't think the FBI or special counsel would want me commenting on ongoing investigations. Ratcliffe, you said in response to the question that I asked that you said we didn't know what we had. That was after 9 months of your involvement in the Russia investigation, correct? Strozk, yeah, I'm going to take your representation that it's 9 months, but yes. Ratcliffe, okay. Strozk, I don't. Anyway, but it was after the initiation of the Russia investigation. Ratcliffe, okay. So you went on to say that you were concerned that there's no big there. What did that mean? Strozk, what I just said, that I think that at that point, at the early stage of the investigation, there were a variety of things going on, and it was not clear to me what represented, whether it was the activities of a group of individuals or something larger or more coordinated, or, in fact, nothing at all, which is frequently the case in early stages of the investigation. I think it was less than 9 months, sir, but I defer to the record. Ratcliffe: okay, but you didn't say, I'm not sure there's no big there. You said, I'm concerned there's no big there. Yes. Concern is worry. Strozk: concern, I think, would take a different context of that. Concern is in regard to my choice of whether or not I wanted to stay as Deputy Assistant Director in the Counterintelligence Division, whether I wanted to go and work for the Special Counsel, which of those provided more of an opportunity for me to protect the nation. And so concern is not, I would not use concern in the way you're inferring. Ratcliffe: okay. Strozk: I understand it's my word, but I'm telling you that's not what I meant. Ratcliffe: right. It's your word, and do you think it's an unreasonable interpretation in the context of the other text messages that you sent about Donald Trump that folks might think you were rooting against him? Strozk: no, I don't think in the context of that conversation or that text that it is. I think it's very reasonable to believe the truth, which is that I was not sure whether or not I should go to Special Counsel or remain at the FBI. Ratcliffe: okay, so what did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on his investigative team ask you about what you meant when you said that? They did not. That doesn't make any sense. Let me read that question again. Ratcliffe: okay, so what did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on his investigative team ask you about what you meant when you said that? They did not. Oh, I see. He's saying they did not ask him. Got it. Ratcliffe: made no inquiry as to whether or not the bias or prejudice against Donald Trump that may be reflected in that in any way impacted the decisions that you made, the actions that you took, or the evidence that you gathered as part of the Russia investigation or as part of his Special Counsel investigative team. Strozk: sir, I'd push back on your characterization that reflected bias. I don't believe that that's the case at all. But in answer to your question of whether or not they asked me about it, they did not. Ratcliffe: fair enough. 4 days later, on May 22nd, 4 days later, on May 22nd, you sent Ms. Page, in response to her sending you a Washington Post article, your response was, God, I suddenly want on this. You know why. Tell us what you meant by that when you said that. Strozk: I don't recall sitting here now what I meant. My inference, looking at that, was that it was based on some investigative event that happened, but I don't recall what it was. Ratcliffe: did it have anything to do with wanting on it so that, because you thought it might lead to Donald Trump being impeached? No, not at all. My desire has always been kind of cases that are interesting, cases that are important to national security. It has nothing to do with the individual or the party of the individual. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that Ratcliffe isn't correct. Just because you weren't being driven by party or individual, Lisa Page said in her testimony that it would be really exciting to be on a team that led to an impeachment. She said that the people from Watergate are still known for that. In fact, she even said someone who made copies on Watergate would still be known for that, which I find hilarious that she didn't mention the Clinton impeachment at all. So I'm not exactly sure where she was going with that. But here's Strozk saying that it's just how I can best protect the national security of the United States. Ratcliffe: okay, so did Bob Mueller ask you if that's what you meant by that? No. Anyone on his investigative team? No. Okay, so just to, because our time is about expired here for this first hour, is it fair to say that, again, to recap, about these text messages that Special Counsel Mueller and or anyone on Special Counsel Mueller's investigative team never made inquiry as to whether these text messages, here we go, reflected bias or prejudice against Donald Trump, or asked you whether or not they impacted the actions or decisions that you took or the information that you gathered in the Russia investigation or as part of the Special Counsel probe? Strozk: so your first question, I don't know who they did or did not ask. I can tell you in answer to your second question, they did not ask me. Ratcliffe, all right. And did Special Counsel Mueller or anyone on Special Counsel Mueller's investigative team ever ask you whether any hatred or any, as you characterize it, expression of personal belief about Donald Trump ever impacted any of the actions or decisions you took or any of the evidence or information you collected? Strozk, no. Ratcliffe, I think our time has expired. Breitenbach will take a 5-minute break and come back on with the minority. And they call a recess. All right. I am going to take a quick break and see if I can't figure out why this camera is frozen. And then reheat my coffee. I think it's gotten a little cold. So give me 5 minutes. I'll be back no later than 10 minutes to the top of the hour. Okay, we're back. And I still have no idea what is going on with that camera. I'm just going to turn it off. Turn it back on. Nope, nothing. Yeah. I'll leave it on so you at least have something to look at in the corner. My incredibly cluttered room. All right, let's get back to it. Take a quick drink. All right, timestamp of 11:30 a.m. Ms. Kim, we will now go back on the record. Time is 11:30. Okay, now we're going to an examination by Ms. Kim, so she'll be asking the questions. Mr. Strozk, thank you for being here today. My name is Janet Kim. I'm a counsel with Ranking Member Elijah Cummings of the House Oversight Committee, who's now the ranking member. The majority member. I will be asking you some questions, and we also have many members here who are interested in speaking with you today. If you're hearing a lot of rustling going on, it's one of the cats crawling behind the blinds. I better open them. Excuse me. One less distraction. I'll be asking you some questions, and we also have many members here who are interested in speaking with you today. I'd like to go back to something, a dialogue that you were having with Mr. Ratcliffe about your performance on Mr. Mueller's investigation. So in your conversation where Special Counsel Mueller and you agreed that it was time for you to go back to the FBI, was there a mutual understanding between the two of you that you, Mr. Strozk, did not believe that your personal political views expressed in those text messages impacted your work in any way? I can't speak to whether or not it was mutual. I certainly believe and know that my personal beliefs never impacted any action that I took as an FBI agent. Have your personal political views ever affected any action you've taken? They have not. Thank you. Mr. Nadler, I think, if you're ready. And now Nadler speaks. I am. Thank you. Mr. Strozk, in March 2017, Director Comey disclosed in public testimony that the FBI had begun investigation into, quote, the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, close quote, including, quote, the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russia government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts, close quote. We now know the investigation began before the election in July of 2016, but no news of that investigation regarding President Trump's campaign leaked out to the press. Were you aware of this investigation before the election? I was. Was Lisa Page? She was. Andrew McCabe? He was. Now, Strozk just answered that with a question mark. He was? James Comey? Yes? Nadler, approximately how many FBI officials were aware of this investigation before the election? Strozk, sir, I would estimate between 15 and 30, but that's an estimate. Nadler, okay, that's fine. Are you aware of any FBI officials leaking information about this investigation before the election? No. Now, see, they're going to sit here and just try to prove that there's nothing wrong with the investigation because they never leaked anything. Like, that's one proves the other, which is, of course, complete and total horse hockey. For them to say that just because there were leaks during the mid-year exam probe, but there weren't any during the Trump-Russia probe, during the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, that makes big deal. Big deal. The fact is, as I read it, they had nothing to leak. The only things they had that they were hanging the investigation on were a comment from Hillary saying, "We think Trump and Putin have a bromance, you should look into it." An offhand comment by Papadopoulos to the Australian ambassador to the UK, and other tiny little increments of nothing. They didn't have any piece of information they could have leaked that wouldn't have looked like they were being petty political animals. And considering how the mid-year exam debacle had gone, had made them look, both the DOJ and the FBI, they certainly couldn't afford any more bad press. So I don't think there's any high-handed, look at us, we're so great, kind of whitewashing going on here. I mean, there is a whitewashing going on, excuse me. I don't think there's any ability of them to put on their best clothes and say, look how terrific we are, we're completely unbiased. That the mid-year exam proved that to be a lie, so this is just window dressing in my opinion. Nadler, did you make any disclosures about this investigation to the press or the public before Election Day? Strozk, no. Nadler, why not? Strozk, that would have been improper. We don't talk about pending investigations. We don't talk about investigations. Well, Andy McCabe certainly did. He leaked to the New York Times something like 3 separate times and lied about them to the Office of Professional Responsibility and the Inspector General. But yeah, that's a little thing. Nadler, how do you think a disclosure to the press or to the public would have impacted Donald Trump's electoral prospects? I think it would have had an adverse impact on his electoral chances. Well, that's very political of you. If someone at the FBI was trying to stop Donald Trump from being elected president, do you think they would have publicly disclosed that his campaign was under investigation for potentially colluding with Russian government actors? Strozk, that might be one way they would seek to impact it. Nadler, but to your knowledge, no one at the FBI did disclose this fact publicly, correct? Correct. Would you consider this strong evidence that there was not a deep state conspiracy at the FBI to stop Donald Trump from being elected? Well, see, again, that's silly. They didn't think they needed to do anything to stop Donald Trump from being elected because they knew Hillary had it all locked up. That whole part about the insurance policy in case you die before you're 40. Dying before you're 40 was their way of saying Trump winning the election. So the Russia investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, was their insurance policy. They just had nothing to base their premiums on. There was no big there. Nadler, if someone at the FBI was trying to stop Donald Trump from being elected president, do you think they would have publicly disclosed that his campaign was under investigation for potentially colluding with Russian government actors? Strozk, that might be one way they would seek to impact it. But to your knowledge, no one at the FBI did disclose this fact publicly, correct? Correct. Would you consider this strong evidence that there was not a deep state conspiracy at the FBI to stop Donald Trump from being elected? Strozk, sir, I can tell you that it would be strong evidence, and in fact, there was no conspiracy to stop candidate Trump from being president. And this would be strong evidence of that proposition? Strozk, yes, sir. Nadler, and was this also strong evidence that you personally were not trying to stop Donald Trump from being elected president? Yes, sir. Why didn't the FBI disclose the existence of this investigation before Election Day? What a stupid question. Strozk, it was a pending counterintelligence matter, both because we don't talk about pending investigations generally, and specifically those that relate to counterintelligence matters, we don't discuss them. Nadler, do you recall the specific discussion about whether or not to publicly disclose the existence of the Trump investigation before the 2016 election? Strozk, I don't recall one. I recall a variety of discussions about how to potentially publicly address the various efforts that the government of Russia was making to interfere with the election. I don't know why you had to worry about publicly addressing it, because behind the scenes, with the intelligence agencies trying to make a case to Obama that Russia was interfering in the election by buying memes and things like that, that they tried to bring it to his attention, and they were told by one of Obama's senior staffers, I believe it might have been Page, but I'm not for sure. But they were told to leave him alone, to drop it, and to not do anything else. So that's how worried they were about Russia interfering with the election. Okay, Nadler. But not a discussion of revealing the investigation of possible collusion with the Trump campaign. Collusion isn't illegal. Strozk. There was a discussion or series of discussions, to my recollection, about how to appropriately and aggressively investigate them and what that path might look like, but not specifically to publicly disclose them. Nadler. Okay. Do you recall when Director Comey made the decision to disclose the existence of the investigation into the Trump campaign? I don't know specifically when he decided, but there were discussions with Mr. Comey and his senior staff that I participated in, and I'm sure others that I didn't, about whether or not to do that as part of the appearance before Congress in making that known to Congress, but I don't know when that occurred. Nadler. Now, Mr. McCabe's deposition to us states as follows, quote, well, I think eventually we had that discussion because eventually we made that decision, and the director sought and received the department's authorization to make that investigation public in March of 2017, close quote. Do you know why Director Comey made the decision to disclose this in March 2017? I don't know why. Or what events occurred that led to that specific timing? That timing, I think, was in the context of the broad efforts that were going on with regard to the government of Russia's intrusion into our election process. I don't recall sitting here what it was that specifically precipitated that decision in the March timeframe. Nadler. Okay, March 2017 timeframe? Yes, sir. Nadler. Now, Mr. Strozk, there have been many public criticisms coming from all sides against former FBI Director James Comey and the decisions that he made in the handling of the Clinton investigation. However, the President and other Republicans have gone well beyond that and have made extremely serious allegations that attack Director Comey's fundamental honesty and integrity, or even accuse him of committing crimes. I'd like to go through some of them with you now to see if you can shed some light. Last week, after the Inspector General released its report on the FBI's handling of the Clinton email investigation, the President's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, went on Fox News and stated, quote, Peter Strozk was running the Hillary information. That's a total fix. That's a closed book now, total fix. Comey should go to jail for that, and Strozk. Let's investigate the investigators. Let's take a halt to the Mueller investigation, unquote. And we're still calling for that special counsel to investigate the mid-year exam investigation. I don't know if we're any closer to it, but one can hope. Nadler continues, first, just to be clear, was the Hillary Clinton email investigation a total fix? Not at all. Complete lie. Nadler, do you believe Director Comey should, quote, go to jail for that? No. Do you believe you should go to jail for that? No. Has the Inspector General accused you of any criminal behavior? No, that's true. Nadler, has anything Director Comey said or done indicate there should be a halt to the Mueller investigation? No. After the Inspector General's report, President Trump also stated, quote, I think Comey was the ringleader of this whole, den of thieves. They were plotting against my election. Quite close. They were plotting against my election. Close quote. Was Director Comey a ringleader of a den of thieves who was plotting against Donald Trump during the election? No. Boy, for a second there I thought he might say yes. Dodged a bullet there, Strozk. Nadler, do you have any reason to believe Director Comey was plotting against Donald Trump during the election? No. I find that hard to believe. Nadler, On April 13th of this year, 2018, President Trump also tweeted, quote, James Comey's a proven leaker and a liar. Virtually everyone in Washington thought he should be fired for the terrible job he did until he was, in fact, fired. He leaked classified information for which he should be prosecuted. He lied to Congress under oath. Close quote. Do you believe Director Comey's a proven liar? No. Why not? My experience and information I have not seen any statement that he's made that was untrue. That's rather narrow. Are you aware of Director Comey ever lying to Congress under oath? No. Has Director Comey ever lied to you? Not to my knowledge. Are you aware of any instances of Director Comey lying? I am not. Mr. Strozk, are you familiar with Director Comey's testimony before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence on June 8, 2017? Generally, yes. Okay. And, sir, I'd say there were a variety of testimonial settings where Director Comey was coming up to the Hill between the Intel, the Gang of Eight, and others, so they all kind of blur together at this time. Nadler, it's okay. Did you generally find that Director Comey's descriptions of events in his written and oral testimony were consistent with the contemporaneous descriptions that he shared with you at the time of those events? Yes. Do you believe that Director Comey accurately shared with the Senate Intelligence Committee his memory of his interactions with President Trump to the best of his recollection? As I understand that testimony, yes. Bobbing and weaving. Nadler, did you find that Director Comey's descriptions of his meetings with President Trump were consistent with the descriptions he shared with you immediately after his meetings with President Trump? Strozk, again, to the extent I was aware of any of those interactions, yes. So in other words, Comey could have been lying, and he had no way to prove that what Comey said didn't happen between him and Trump. So therefore, he wasn't aware of anything more than that. And so, yes, he was consistent. Self-propagating consistency. Nadler, overall, do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of Director Comey's oral or written testimony or representation of the facts from when he was the FBI director? No. Okay, so we're taking the word of a disgraced FBI agent to back up the moral character of a disgraced FBI agent. In this case, director of the FBI. That's way to buttress up your witnesses there, Nadler. Nadler, Mr. Strozk, I have attended every interview in this investigation. Actually, I'm not sure that's... Let me take that back. Let me just say, in your opinion, as far as I know... Sorry. Let me just say your opinion, as far as I know, is consistent with that of every FBI employee who has come before you. Director Comey is an honest person, and there's no reason that he should not be a credible witness for the special counsel. That's correct, is it not? Yes, it is. Thank you on that. Now, when did you join the special counsel's probe? Asked and answered, Nadler. Again, it was, my recollection, it was the late spring, early summer of 2017. And what were your responsibilities on the special counsel's team? Again, asked and answered. Strozk, I was the lead agent, and that's not to say case agent or investigator, but kind of putting together the FBI structure within that office. And when did you first learn that the IG's office was examining your text with Lisa Page? My recollection is that it was sometime between late July or early August of that year. And when were you removed from the special counsel Mueller's probe? Shortly thereafter. Nadler, so far, special counsel Mueller's probe has resulted in 18 indictments against 20 individuals and 3 companies, cataloging 75 criminal acts. And none of them that are connected to Trump, even tangentially, have anything to do with the campaign. 5 different individuals have so far pled guilty. Were you involved in the prosecutorial decisions that resulted in these indictments and guilty pleas? Strozk, I would defer to the special counsel's office to talk about the process that they went through with prosecution decisions. Generally, prosecution decisions are made by the prosecutors, but I don't want to comment on the process that Special Counsel Mueller did or didn't use. I defer to them to describe that. Nadler, okay. And what would you say to those who allege that the special counsel's probe has become irredeemably tainted because you and Lisa Page were once a part of the Russia investigation? I'd say that it's utterly nonsense. Because? Strozk. Because, first of all, I never, ever considered, or let alone did any act which was based on any personal belief. My actions were always guided by the pursuit of the truth, and moreover, anything I did was done in the context of a much broader organization. It was done with other agents, with agents and analysts below me, with agents and analysts above me, with the rules and regulations that govern everything we do in the FBI. Okay, let's just stop there for a second. Again, mid-year exam was a hoax. It was never going to result in an indictment for Hillary. The Department of Justice saw to that from the very beginning, and the way the FBI handled the interrogations of the people involved with that private server were laughable. None of those people were charged with lying to the FBI, even though basically all of them did. Some of them were given several opportunities to restate their testimony in order to get out from under the lying. Yet, with the Mueller probe, one misstatement to the FBI, and you're under indictment. So, yeah, there's no special leaning one way or the other there, of course. And then the other thing is, Strozk was instrumental in getting the Crossfire Hurricane investigation started. That's what got the ball rolling. So when Comey lied about Trump being investigated, when Comey leaked his quote-unquote notes, memos of his meetings with Trump to his buddy, who then leaked them to the New York Times, and then broke the law and lied about it, that allowed Mueller to come in and pick up Crossfire Hurricane. If there was no Crossfire Hurricane at that point, all Mueller would have had was the obstruction of justice charge, which was blatantly baseless. The president can fire anyone in the executive branch at any time, as long as he's not actively impeding an investigation, is the way I understand it. As long as he's not actively creating a criminal act and obstructing justice. And firing Comey was not a criminal act. Until, as Trump said in his tweet, he did it, and then the left was after him for blood. So don't give me this wrap in the flag crap. To continue with Strozk. It was done with other agents, with agents and analysts below me, with agents and analysts above me, with the rules and regulations that govern everything we do in the FBI. And so I think when you look at the totality of what occurred, the procedures that were followed, demonstrably followed, and followed in accordance with law and our procedures, they were complete. They were thorough. They were absolutely done with no motive other than a pursuit of the truth. Ha, ha, ha. And I think the fact that you, as you noted, without getting into any details about what the special counsel is or isn't doing, simply the public record of the charges and guilty pleas speak for themselves. Well, I've already spoken to those, so screw you, Strozk. Nadler, thank you very much. I'll now hand over the questioning to Congressman Krishnamurthy. I got that right the first time. We're going to go with K as this continues when I use his name. So from now on, Krishnamurthy is K. K, good morning. Strozk, good morning, sir. K, thank you so much. Mr. Strozk, as I'm sure you're aware, there has been a litany of attacks from the highest levels of government accusing the FBI and DOJ of conducting investigations driven by political bias instead of just facts and a rule of law. In other words, accurate. The question is this. Are you aware of any FBI or DOJ investigation motivated by political bias? I'm not. You lying sack. K, why not? Strozk, it's not who we are. That is not my decades of FBI experience, we are driven by a pursuit of the truth. Just as I would never allow any personal opinion or belief to drive an action, I wouldn't tolerate it in others. And that is the code of the Bureau. And what distresses me the most are people's suggestion that the FBI is the sort of place where that even could possibly occur is destructive to the rule of law and the mission of the FBI to protect the United States. Now, let me just state, I do not hold a bad view, an injudicious view of the rank and file of the FBI. No one's demonstrated that anyone under these people has acted in bad faith. And I don't think anyone ever will. What we're worried about, what has been shown, is that the top level of the FBI involved in mid-year exam, Crossfire Hurricane, were dirty. And especially what we've seen recently regarding McCabe saying that Rosenstein was going to wear a wire in the White House and try to trip Trump into saying something that would trigger the 25th Amendment. A silent coup. That's the FBI and the DOJ, folks. Top levels of the FBI and DOJ. You can't get me to think there was nothing bad going on there, because there obviously was. It's provable. It's indictable, in my opinion. But the rank and file, no. I have every ounce of faith in them that I possibly could. I believe they are consummate professionals. K. On February 2nd, 2018, President Trump tweeted, quote, "The top leadership and investigators of the FBI and Justice Department have politicized the sacred investigative process in favor of Democrats and against Republicans, something which would have been unthinkable just a short time ago. Rank and file are great people!" Exclamation point. The question is this. Do you agree that the top leadership and investigators of the FBI and the Justice Department have politicized the sacred investigative process in favor of Democrats and against Republicans? No. I'd love to see your reasoning behind that, but Kay is not going to ask for that. Kay, throughout your career at the FBI, are you aware of any instances of the FBI conducting investigations in favor of Democrats and against Republicans? No. Again, a lie. K. Are any investigations staffed based on whether you're a Democrat or a Republican? No. Which makes one wonder why Mueller has all of those Democratic investigators or lawyers on his team and not one Republican. You'd think the odds just alone would toss a couple Republicans into that mix. I'm just saying. K. Are you aware of any actions ever taken to damage the Trump campaign at the highest levels of the Department of Justice or the FBI? No. Well, maybe not the campaign, but since the campaign, since the election certainly. Strozk, no. K. Are you aware of any actions ever taken to personally target Mr. Trump at the highest levels of the Department of Justice or the FBI? No. Well, that's a complete lie. K. By the way, how many people were on the Hillary Clinton investigation? Strozk, it varied. I would say it would range between 20 to 30 at a minimum and 60 to 70 at the highest point. K. Thank you. Is there any evidence that the FBI or DOJ had any officials that took any actions based in favor of Clinton? So that's any actions biased in favor of Clinton. No. Is there any evidence that President Obama ordered any investigative activity that was biased in favor of Clinton or, alternatively, biased against President Trump? To my knowledge, no. Now, see, this is a nice lawyer question here. Is there any evidence? Well, there was no evidence in the IG report that Page or Strozk pushed the investigation either way because of their political views. But they didn't say that didn't happen. They said there was no material or testimonial evidence that it happened. That's not the same as it didn't happen. That's just saying we can't prove it. And so here, is there any evidence that Obama ordered any investigative activity against President Trump, there's no paper trail. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Now, Strozk gives a very judicious answer. To my knowledge, no. So he doesn't hang himself out completely to dry there. K. Is there any evidence that President Obama ordered a wiretap of Donald Trump or the Trump campaign? To my knowledge, no. But it happened, didn't it? Whether or not Obama specifically requested it is immaterial. It happened. We know that the FISA court happened, so screw you, K. K. I've been troubled by escalating attacks against the DOJ and the FBI, attacks against the independence of the institutions, the integrity of their employees, and the legitimacy of the DOJ and FBI's investigations. I want to ask you about some of these statements and get your personal reaction. On December 3rd, 2017, the president tweeted, quote, "After years of Comey, with the phony and dishonest Clinton investigation and more running the FBI, its reputation is in tatters. Worst in history, exclamation point. But fear not, we will bring it back to greatness." Question. Do you agree with the president's statement that the FBI's reputation is in, quote-unquote, tatters, and is the quote-unquote worst in history? No. You could make a case for that answer, actually, because most of you are too young to remember, but J. Edgar Hoover, Mr. FBI, was a blackmailer. He kept information on everybody, including presidents. And if you weren't going to give him what he wanted, he would threaten to release some of that information to the public and the press. And back then, the press covered for presidents. The secret skinny dipping in the pool with White House interns, or other sexual proclivities of White House occupants. Those were covered up, even though they were open secrets. But Hoover could get that stuff out there. So whether or not this FBI was completely worse than Hoover's FBI, hard to say. But certainly in light of what we've learned now, with what I just referenced earlier, McCabe and the 25th Amendment stuff, I think you could make a case that the FBI now is at least in as bad a shape as it was during Hoover's final days. Because that was a very dark time for the FBI. When Hoover died, a lot of shit hit the fan. Okay. Do you agree with the president's characterization that the Clinton investigation was, quote, phony and dishonest, close quote? No. Okay. In your opinion, what kind of impact does statements like these have on the morale of rank-and-file FBI agents? I think they are terribly destructive. I think the FBI is an extraordinarily competent, proud, and vital part of the protection of the rule of law in this country, and I think those are harmful statements. Not as harmful as your actions. Pete, you and Lisa and Andy and James and Priestap and Baker. Yeah, none of you guys did anything to hurt the FBI. It's all the president's fault. Because we all know history started the day Trump was elected. Nothing had happened before that. Ridiculous. Okay. When you say, quote, they're terribly destructive, unquote, what do you mean? How does that impact your work? I think it has a variety of impacts. I think certainly the impact on public faith and confidence of the FBI and its ability to do its job. I think an impact on the morale of the men and women of the FBI who are doing extraordinary work, as they always have done. Okay. Now I know that the FBI is going to continue to do its job, and the men and women of the FBI will continue to do their jobs. But did you personally see morale erode as the president made such tweets? So now it's all about the president. See, during the Republican questioning, it was about what factors Strozk and, to a certain extent, Page's bias against the president had in the decision-making process in the investigations. And to a smaller extent, what their opinion of Clinton had in the mid-year exam investigation. But on this side of the aisle, It's all about feelings. And that was true with the Page testimony, and I'm going to be really surprised if it's not true with the Orr testimony when I read it tomorrow. And that, by the way, will be the final chapter in this series. Tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m., we'll go over the Bruce Orr testimony. But today is all Strozk. Let's reread Kay's question. When you say, quote, they're terribly destructive, unquote, what do you mean? How does that impact your work? Strozk. I think it has a variety of impacts. I think certainly the impact on public faith and confidence of the FBI and its ability to do its job. I think an impact on the morale of the men and women of the FBI who are doing extraordinary work, as I always have done. Okay. Now, I know that the FBI is going to continue to do its job. Oh, I'm sorry. I really read up. Okay. But did you personally see morale erode as the president made such tweets? Strozk. I think it is fair to say that the politicized situation in which we find ourselves has been very difficult amongst the men and women of the FBI. Okay. At the White House press briefing, the day after Director Comey was fired, Sarah Huckabee Sanders stated that the termination had happened because, I quote, most importantly, the rank and file of the FBI had lost confidence in their director, unquote. This is the question. Looking back on the lead-up to Director Comey's dismissal, do you agree with Ms. Sanders that the rank and file of the FBI had lost confidence in Director Comey? I do not. What was your reaction when you learned that Director Comey was fired? I was stunned. I found it hard to believe that something like that would happen, and particularly in the graceless way that it happened was shocking to me. What do you mean by graceless way? Can you explain? My understanding from media reports is that he learned about it from a news feed while he was in Los Angeles field office, and I, regardless of belief or opinion of anybody, that a career public servant would be treated in that way was stunning to me. Then you weren't paying attention to what Comey was doing with Trump. Then you weren't listening to his quote-unquote memos about his conversations with Trump. If you paid attention to any of that at all, you would have seen this coming. Maybe not through a news feed, but certainly not with kid gloves. He's lucky he wasn't frog marched out of the building. Okay. What was the reaction of FBI agents with whom you spoke regarding the firing of Director Comey? What has this got to do with anything? Strozk. I believe the consensus of the people that I spoke with and was aware of is that people were surprised and stunned. Okay. On that same day, President Trump tweeted, quote, James Comey will be replaced by someone who will do a far better job bringing back the spirit and prestige of the FBI. Question is this. Did you agree with the president's assertion that there was some problem with the spirit and prestige of the FBI under Director Comey? No. Well, then you're an idiot. Okay, why not? Strozk. Because my experience throughout my career at the FBI to this day is that the spirit and the prestige is strong. The prestige of the FBI is strong. That the men and women of the FBI believe in their mission, are extraordinarily competent, and people of character and integrity, and that did not and has not wavered. Okay, and how long have you been at the FBI? I've been at the FBI for just under 22 years. Following the Inspector General's report, President Trump has stated, and I quote, I think Comey was the ringleader of this whole, den of thieves. They were plotting against my election. Question. Do you have any reason to believe the FBI is a, quote, den of thieves, close quote? No. This is so transparent. All they're doing is saying, President Trump was mean to you. Do you agree that he had a reason to be mean to you? No. Well, President Trump was mean to you another time. Do you think he had reason to be mean with you that time? No. And do you think it hurt the feelings of the people you work with? Yes. Over and over again. Now, I will admit, during the Republican questioning, there was that constant repetition of the, did your bias have any effect on your actions or decisions, etc. That was boilerplate, but they were getting to a point. This is just feelings. Driving me crazy. Let me go back to that question. Do you have any reason to believe that the FBI is a, quote, den of thieves, close quote? Strozk, no. Why not? Because it's not. Again, the men and women of the FBI have sworn an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. My experience is that it's not, that it is something that they live every day, and it is a hall of honor, not at all the opposite of some sort of den of thieves. Not at all the opposite? That's not the way you wanted to put that. Okay. Did you personally witness anyone at the FBI attempting to plot against Donald Trump's election? No. Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. Thank you. Jackson Lee, good morning. I'm just going to call it Lee, her Lee from now on, excuse me. Strozk, good morning. Lee. I'm Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee. None of us have probably said where we're from. I'm from Houston, Texas, and have been a member of this committee for a long period of time. Well, actually, that's not true. Most of the people who introduced themselves in the preamble was a city or district that they're from. But not all. I'll give her that. I'll note that you are an Army veteran or a veteran of a branch, correct? Yes, ma'am. And it is your view, as I understand it, and not put words in your mouth, your view of the Bureau and its service to this nation. How do you view the Bureau now? I love the Bureau. I think the role of the Bureau is of extraordinary importance to the FBI, to the rule of law, to the maintenance of liberty and justice, and I couldn't be prouder to be a part of that. Wow. I understand there are about 35,000 members of the FBI, maybe give or take some. Sure it's not exactly 35,000, Lee. Strozk, yes, ma'am. Would you attribute to them some of the disparaging remarks that have been made about them nationally, or are you seeing, through your 22 years, hardworking individuals in the service of this nation? Cue the national anthem. Strozk, very much the latter. I would not attribute any of those remarks that have been discussed earlier. So let me pursue a line of questioning that I hope that I won't do a little bit of a mismatch on it. But I want to begin just very briefly on the question of bias. Do you have any reason to believe that the vast majority of FBI agents are partisan? They are Democrats, Republicans, or in this instance, Democrats. Beautifully worded. Strozk, all FBI agents have political opinions. I have never seen that expressed in any partisan way. Yesterday, when I read Paige's testimony, Saturday, she was saying how the FBI leans in a conservative way, and the only way she could back that up is to saying it's a branch of the law enforcement. And maybe rank and file are leaning conservative. But the top, the political appointees, were all hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats who would do anything for Obama and the DOJ. So the rank and file makeup isn't importantly. It's the top. And that's what Trump has consistently talked about, the top. Strozk, all FBI agents have political opinions. I have never seen that expressed in any partisan way. There is no bar for FBI agents of having political affiliations, or is there? That's correct, ma'am. That was an either-or question, dude. And so, when FBI staffs a politically sensitive investigation, for example, a public corruption case, does the FBI consider the personal political persuasion of its agents in making those staffing decisions? They do not. In your 22 years, have you been uncomfortable in national security sensitive investigations by looking over and saying, this is a Democrat or Republican, and he or she is showing it? No, I have not. I wonder if anyone watching you and Paige would have said the same thing. Lee, and that the results of the investigation has been influenced by a party affiliation? I've never seen that. Therefore, as the Clinton investigation began to mature, you and your affiliation, may I ask your affiliation? I'm independent. And let me also ask your status at the FBI now is what? I'm an employee. I'm a special agent, deputy assistant director, and HOD. I don't know what that means. All right, you're still employed. Yes, I am. It is your intent to stay employed. Yes. Well, your intentions didn't work for you, did they, Mr. Strozk? Lee, you would be disappointed if for some reason they reached down and determined that you needed to stay, needed to go? Oh, very much so. And you still think you have the ability to serve this nation in a fair and impartial manner? Without question. So let me, Mr. Strozk. The Inspector General found that you placed a high priority on the Trump-Russia investigation fall of 2016, but stated that we did not have the confidence that Strozk's decision to prioritize the Russia investigation over following up on the mid-year related investigative lead was free from bias. What is your reaction to this conclusion? I was deeply disappointed by that conclusion for a couple of reasons. The first is, I think the record, which the IG has, is very clear that, within hours of learning the existence of the laptop, I assigned a subordinate supervisor, his agents, and some of his analysts, and an attorney to go up to New York and follow up on the laptop. That's a complete lie. He sat on that laptop for weeks and only got the ball rolling about investigating the emails on that laptop. And that's Anthony Weiner's laptop, by the way. The New York FBI office was searching it for kiddie porn. Oh, there went my monetization. For CP. And they found thousands and thousands of Clinton emails and UMA emails back and forth with Clinton. The New York office notified Strozk and said, hey, we can't look at these Weiner emails, or these Abedin and Clinton emails, because they're not part of our search warrant. You need to get somebody up here with a new search warrant and get an image of this thing and study it. And that sat on Strozk's desk and sat on Strozk's desk until the New York office finally said, look, you send somebody up here and get this straightened out, or we're going to tell the public that you're slow rolling this, because we don't want to get hung out to dry on it. We've done our part, now do yours. That is how it worked. Lee. And this was the Weiner laptop. Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And Lee, always put that word in front of it. There are a lot of laptops floating around. That's an excellent point. There are? Including my own, maybe. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. And again, you sent it to New York, or you sent the instruction. Right. I asked them to go up to New York within hours. They ended up having... Give me that time frame. What? My recollection is either that evening, literally within 2 to 3 hours, or the following morning, I had a conversation, and that they ended up having a... And you recall that day? I can't, but it's in the record. I want to say it was either on or about September 29th. Excuse me just a moment. Oh, I have to mute my microphone for just a second. Excuse me. Okay, sorry about that. I had to answer a password question from my technical director who's out of the house at the moment. I appreciate your patience. So we'll start off with Lee talking about laptops. You sent it to New York, or you sent the instruction? Right. I asked them to go up to New York within hours. They ended up having... Give me that time frame. What? My recollection is either that evening, literally within 2 to 3 hours, or the following morning, I had a conversation, and that they ended up having a... Lee, and you recall that they struck. I can't, but it's in the record. I want to say it was either on or about September 29th. End of September. I think that's an important point. Struck. End of September, yes. And they did, and they ended up calling because they wanted to see what the state was. They had an extended discussion with the New York folks who told them that the processing of the Wiener laptop was not complete and that they hadn't processed it, and they talked about some legal issues, and that they would get back when it was complete. So my belief, certainly that the Inspector General's inference is that somehow I backburnered it is directly rebutted by the fact of following up and dispatching a team to do it. Well, if that's the case, and you have records of that, then why did the AG make the opposite determination? Mind explaining that, Pete? Lee, well, let me tie. Can you explain why you prioritized the Russia investigation in September, October? Did you do that? No, I don't see that as a binary decision. There were a lot of things that were going on at the Counterintelligence Division at the time. I was a Deputy Assistant Director, and so that's a fairly senior executive within Counterintelligence Division. So there are a number of things that were going on at the time. I can tell you, I never took resources off one and put it onto the other. But I'd also say, Congresswoman, the nature of the allegations about the Russia investigation, I cannot think of a more grave allegation to the Counterintelligence Division, or let alone the nation, that a hostile foreign power was seeking to clandestinely influence our presidential election. Let me just pause there for a second. It's 17 minutes to the top of the hour. I will be taking a half-hour break at the top of the hour. Hopefully I'll resolve the camera issue while that's going on too. But we'll get everything going. So I'll try to restart the stream at least 5 minutes before the bottom of the hour. So you all have a notice that it's coming back up. And we'll start as near to 12:30 my time straight as I can manage, just so you know. Okay, back to it. So that last sentence was, I cannot think of a more grave allegation to the Counterintelligence Division, or let alone the nation, that a hostile foreign power was seeking to clandestinely influence our presidential election. Nadler. So let me just ask, Lee, Mr. Nadler, I'm yielding. Nadler, thank you. Nadler, let me just ask you at this point. So in other words, given the fact that you instructed some people to look into the Wiener laptop, you would characterize the assertion that you prioritized the Russian investigation as inaccurate? I would. Because they were both going on and... Right. Answer, what I would say is, there were, in my mind, in my recollection, I had put the appropriate immediate managerial and subordinate staff on the matter to address it. I think as the DAD, as any manager, as any executive, your job is to look at a host of competing priorities and decide where your limited resources, your limited time, how you're going to address them. So I saw that as immediately appropriately addressed, and I continued then to look at the wide range of responsibilities I had, one which is truly significant, the Russia investigations, but there are any number of other espionage cases or counterintelligence matters that were going on at the same time. Nadler, thank you very much. I yield back. Now we're back to Jackson Lee. Yeah, if I recall your testimony, you sort of heightened the national security issue, not prioritizing, but just it struck you being in that arena, that you better look into the potential of a campaign actually dealing with Russian operatives. If so, they were important, but that struck you. Is that correct? That I have no idea what you just said. Struck, yes. All these things. I say all these things are important. These are all legitimate, reasonable investigative avenues. When you look at the severity of impact to national security, I think it is demonstrably true that a foreign nation clandestinely putting themselves into a presidential election, it doesn't get much more serious or grave than that. Jackson Lee. So in September, you were working on the Trump-Russia investigation 2016. Does that ring a bell? You can just say yes or no. Strozk. Congresswoman, I'm not trying to be cute, but without getting into kind of our organizational structure, classified information, I was involved in that process. Lee. Yeah. Would you say it was a majority of your work? Strozk. A significant portion of it. I don't know that it was the majority. It might have been close to the majority, but a lot of it for sure. Do you have any reason to... Let me just ask you this. What would be your understanding of why the Clinton email investigation was made public and the Trump-Russia email was not by the FBI? So that decision, my understanding of that, by Director Comey, was that he believed that based on the nature of the Clinton email investigation, which was not there were counterintelligence elements to it, but it was primarily a pretty straightforward mishandling investigation of classified information, and that I don't want to speak for the director's reasons. He's spoken at length in front of this body and others, but I see that as a different prospect than that of an ongoing counterintelligence investigation. Didn't even come close to answering the question. Lee, somewhere like a mountain and a molehill? I don't think I would use those terms. I think it is a fair, if you're stepping back from any particular case, if you were to compare a generic case of mishandling of classified information compared to a generic hostile and foreign power interfering with the electoral process and allegedly colluding with members of the candidate of a major party for the presidency of the United States, those are vastly different threats to national security. So why wouldn't you bring up the one that's vastly more important, which you're implying is the Trump-Russia investigation? Why would you not bring that up, but you would instead renew and publicly disclose that you've reopened the Hillary Clinton mid-year exam investigation? One is obviously less than the other in your eyes, is obviously not as important. So why bring up mid-year exam but not bring up Trump-Russia? You're arguing against yourself, Strozk. Lee, I'll accept that they're vastly different. Let me just understand. Can we say that the Trump-Russia investigation was a top priority? Top priority. My understanding from Director Comey is that, yes, it was. Were you looking to influence the election with the results of this process of investigating Trump-Russia? No. I may have said this, but would you have acknowledged publicly the email investigation for Ms. Clinton in the summer of 2016? Well, it wasn't. No, that's right. Well, actually, it had been leaked to the New York Times by McCabe. So that information was out there. So they wouldn't acknowledge it publicly, but it was known. Strozk. That decision was made by Director Comey after a lot of discussion and debate. So he is the head of the FBI, and that was his decision. Now, as was stated by Page Saturday and Friday, the FBI isn't supposed to comment when there's no charges to be filed. So if that investigation, if mid-year exam hadn't been public, there would have been no reason for Comey to get out there and say, well, here's what Hillary broke the law, or how Hillary broke the law, A, B, and C. But she didn't have intent, so she couldn't have done it in a illegal sense, so we're not going to prosecute her. That would have been, to not say that would have been the normal FBI matter or protocol. That's why some people are running around with their hair on fire right now because there's a possibility that the Mueller probe results won't be public because there's no indictments being handed down. And therefore, there's no reason to air dirty laundry just to do so. Things that you find out during an investigation that are unflattering but are not illegal have no business being released to the public. We'll see. So the last sentence by Strozk, referring to Comey, he is the head of the FBI and that was his decision. Lee, would you have done it? I don't want to get into a hypothetical because that was not the position I was in. Is that usually done? It is not usually done. Lee, did you take any actions to bury or backburner that laptop that seems to be floating around? So you told him to use Wiener in front of laptop because of the fact that there are a lot of laptops out there. And the next time you refer to it, you don't do that. Anyway, Strozk answers no. Lee, and would you consider some of the accusations of political bias, and I'm just going to say between yourself and Lisa, legitimate to the extent that you downplayed your oath, you diminished your responsibilities, and you were engaged in selecting internally support for one candidate over another? No. Lee, in the presidential election 2016, Strozk, I don't agree with that at all. I consider those personal opinions exchanged with a close confidant and nothing else. Lee, I think that I have concluded those. I just want to finish. I'm sorry, I got that all screwed up. Let me start again. I think that I have concluded those. I just want to finish by the point of the concept of burying the laptop and not doing the work. You don't believe on the Clinton investigation. You do not believe, let me ask the question so that it is not my words. What is your opinion of what you did with respect to that investigation? Burying, not pursuing it. Well asked, Lee. Well asked. Strozk, I don't believe I buried it at all. I believe I took immediate action to assign subordinate personnel and subordinate managers who were completely uninvolved with the Russian investigations to pursue the matter, and that they did that. And you did nothing to further that along. And the IG report points that out quite specifically. Lee, thank you very much. Strozk, thank you. Swalwell. God. You know what? Let's change up a little bit because I don't want to come into Swalwell's questioning, which is going to be excruciating. And then, because he's the idiot from California. Let's break here where Swalwell is going to start his questioning. And then I'll come back. I'll just take a slightly longer break so I can fix this camera. I'll come back at 30 past the hour. So we're going to take a 6-minute extra break than I'd originally planned. I hope that's okay with everybody. So we're going to leave it here at page 82. I'll stop the stream now. And again, I'll try to restart the next stream at least 5 minutes early so you'll have notification that it's up. And I'll try to start as close to 12:30, but not sooner, my time, as I can. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.